We are Zilla Chat, episode 2. Shannon Pennefeather, multiple award-winning editor, right? I mean, a number of your books have won awards. You've won an award in 2000 for your 2003 Mill City book from Minnesota Book Award, and also award-winning baker.
Many of the books that I've worked on have earned awards. I won't take much of the credit, however, because the authors are the ones doing the heavy lifting. They're the ones doing the research and the writing and that, and I just come in and back clean up at the end.
Talk about your first love. What about this is exciting? What
About the editorial process?
Yeah.
It's funny to think that for many years I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was going to school. I'm an English major. They say you can do so many things with an English major, and then I get my degree, and what am I going to do? Well, continue going to school until I figure out what I'm going to do with my English degree. So I went on to grad school, and...
Can I just pause?
Yep.
The best grad school in the country, right?
Of course. Penn State.
Yeah, good. Excellent.
Go Nittany Lions. Went on to grad school and realized pretty quickly that I didn't want to be in academia. I wasn't cut out to be a teacher. I don't belong in the classroom in front of students necessarily. One-on-one is great, but I wasn't good at the front of a classroom teaching composition. So here I give a shout out to my husband, who at the time was my boyfriend, and said, you need to find an internship. You need to figure out what you're going to do with this English major. So after 1 year of grad school internship that was not official at the Penn State University Press, they were looking for someone to help out as far as putting together mailings, doing just sort of grunt work around the office, and I came in and said, I can help, I'll volunteer. They didn't even pay me. So I was in there for a year discovering that publishing is the answer. This is where I want to be. This is where I've been moving towards my whole life, and I didn't even know it. If I look back to, say, 7th grade, I think about the spelling books that we used, and they had little sections that would be like, test your editing. So they'd show you the little editing symbols and correct the sentence. And I loved that, but I never thought you can be an editor for your job. That's where you're going to end up. So it's a path that I've been on all my life, but it took me until grad school to figure out exactly where I was going to
Future of publishing?
Future of publishing. Books are not going to die. A lot of people are talking about ebooks and how people aren't reading anymore or they're reading differently. But people love the tactile experience of picking up a book. So I don't think book publishing is going to end. It's just going to be shifting as it has been for centuries. You're looking at different types of technology. What people are wanting to read as an ebook is different from what people want to read as a physical book. So while we're moving into the ebook world, we're not concerned that books as we've known them for so many decades are going to go.
So first book then, what was the first book that you edited that you had your hands on?
Well, when I came to the Minnesota Historical Society Press is when I actually became a project editor, so I would be assigned to a book to see it all the way through. And I can say that when I started, I picked up some that were sort of midway through, so they'd already been accepted, they'd already been developed into what they were going to be, and I came in and did maybe the copy editing or the proofreading. And one was a collected volume called Swedes in the Twin Cities, which when you're working on a collected volume, you have to be concerned about all these different voices because there are several different authors. So there's a lot of cleanup to do and make things consistent, which is something that I love. So that was a good way to come in. I also worked on a collection of Ojibwe stories, which was a lot of fun because it was a way into the culture here. I grew up in Wisconsin, I spent some time in Pennsylvania, but then when I came to Minnesota, suddenly there's all this history to learn. So Swedes, Ojibwe, 2 projects to start with when I got here.
So describe a little bit the process, like once you get the book and once you're assigned to work on the project, once you decide you want to work on the project, what's the next step?
Mm-hmm. So say we see a proposal that's just a couple of pages, hey, I've got this great book idea. And then you want to talk through with the author, what are they thinking of as far as research is concerned, where they're getting their material, are there other directions that they might want to think about, and then send them away and let them write. Sometimes it works out that way. Other times we'll see a full-fledged manuscript here. I've been writing for years, or maybe not years, but here's the material and I would like to see it published. And then you read through it and you think about, well, this chapter could be developed a little bit more, or you didn't cite this particular source, or hey, it's great, let's go with it. Then, so what I've just described is developmental editing, thinking about what the project will be. And then it moves to copy editing, which is actually looking at the words and looking at the paragraphs and thinking about, are they in the right order? Are there grammatical fixes to make? Can you make things consistent as far as spelling is concerned? What other questions do you need to ask? So sometimes I'll see projects that just start right there. You're going to copy edit this and make it as tidy as you can, and we're not so concerned about what additional work could be done. So we moved from developmental editing to copy editing, and then there's proofreading. Once you've got a project put together, the text is set, you've got all the images, if you're illustrating it, you've gotten a map, are there tables, that sort of thing, hand off to the designer, and it becomes pages. They do the layout, and then you want to proofread it and make sure that you catch any glaring errors before it goes to press, because you don't want to see those in the final book. And I have to say that proofreading is actually my favorite part of the process, because I love catching those last minute, oh, I got that one, it's fixed. I wanted to say something about learning to edit and learning to be edited, because when I started out as an editor, I would often see the book that I wanted and not necessarily the book that the author wanted, and there would be struggles when you get to copy editing, and I'm saying, well, this sentence sounds better to my ear this way, and maybe the author doesn't agree. And early on, I would do more battling than I should have. I should have been able to step back and say, no, this is what the author wants, and if it's grammatically correct, let it go ahead. So I'm much better now at finessing the relationship with an author and thinking about what's best for the book, but what also is the book that the author wants as opposed to the book that I want.
I think that there is a potential disconnect between the way people see recipes executed on TV and cooking shows from how it's often written in
because
cookbook.
I'm someone who's very rule-bound, so I'm better at baking than I am at cooking. I don't cook off the cuff. I like to follow recipes to a T and then maybe experiment once I've successfully completed the recipe a few times. So then you think about people who are watching cooking shows where there's all this activity and maybe they're not looking at a recipe, maybe they're creating from their own experience or their own head, and it happens to work out or maybe it doesn't. And then you turn to a recipe, and do you want to follow it to a T, or do you want to try to experiment, and where do you fit in your kitchen? Are you someone that can experiment successfully, or are you someone like me who really needs the rules and likes to see it all lined out down to the last measurement?
Okay, so award-winning baker,
How did this happen?
how did this happen, and where do the recipes come from, and how do you create them, and how do you make them your
I'll
own?
tell you why I entered anything in the state fair. So my mom is a baker, always made wonderful cookies, cakes. She can make my birthday cake forever as far as I'm concerned. She's an excellent pie baker. And I always struggled. She made all of our bread while we were growing up. We always had homemade bread.
Wow.
So that it seemed like a treat when we got store-bought bread in a really twisted sort of way.
Yeah.
But yes, we were blessed with homemade bread growing up. So when I get my own kitchen, I keep failing when I'm trying to bake bread. I try to make pie crusts and they don't turn out, and I feel like an utter failure in comparison to my mom. But there was one summer where I wanted to make a strawberry rhubarb pie, and I worked really hard on the crust, and it came out just beautiful. It came out of the oven, it was just sitting there, and I thought, what can I do with this pie? I'm going to enter something in the state fair. So that was in June, and then by August I'm entering.
Wow.
I think I did apple pie and zucchini bread. I might have done a couple of other things. So as far as developing the recipe, for me it's more adding spice or not, or what kind of fruit are you using nuts or not, that sort of thing. But then also really practicing the crust, trying to get that right. And I often fail at pie crust. It's something that either I'm on or I'm not, as it seems. So I entered that first year and took I think it was third place for zucchini bread. Amazing. When you see the entries at the state fair, creative activities, hundreds and hundreds.
No,
and actually, even showing up to drop off your entries, there's a 3-hour window on Sunday where you drop things off, and I was standing there with my 2 items. Here's my pie and here's my zucchini bread, and there are people pulling up in minivans that have dozens and dozens of entries, and I'm feeling like this lame home baker. Give it a shot.
It's awesome.
Managed to get a ribbon. So I try to enter something every year. Sometimes it's one item, sometimes it's a couple items, but I have taken a couple of ribbons, and my coworkers love that I'm testing recipes, because the month running up to the state fair, there's lots of ugly pie or ugly cookies or whatever. Give me some feedback.
So they're very encouraging?
Yes.
Are you going to write a cookbook?
No.
Do you see yourself writing a cookbook?
No.
Are you going to write a different kind of book?
No.